Okay, great. So I'm ready to make a start, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that introduction. So yes, I am an inpatient psychiatrist in Toronto, and I also produce mental health short films. So I'm very passionate about the use of media responsibly to produce mental health related content and to bring social issues to the forefront of conversation. So today I'm going to talk about the interplay between the media and eating disorders, with a particular interest in how social media has the potential to be damaging and triggering to individuals who have eating disorders or those who are vulnerable to developing eating disorders. So to start off with, I want to be really clear that I'm not suggesting that social media directly causes eating disorders. Eating disorders are complex, multifactorial conditions, and how these factors contribute to the overall etiology of eating disorders varies from person to person. So like any other health issue or any other mental health issue, it's very important that we take a socio-cultural approach in order to properly understand these illnesses and effectively manage them. So what are eating disorders? This is the last talk of a 2-day conference. So I'm not going to go in very deeply into the basic definitions. But just for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to mainly be focusing on anorexia nervosa. One of the facts that I found very alarming was that anorexia nervosa has the highest mortality rate out of all the mental health conditions. Bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorders are also two very common or very well-known mental health eating disorders. And I will touch on orthorexia as well, which is a newer disorder, and it's not actually officially in the DSM, but there's awareness that's now starting to come out about orthorexia, and it's also known to be closely linked to social media. Okay, so social media came into our lives probably in the last 15 to 20 years. And eating disorders definitely existed prior to the existence of social media. So I'm going to run through a brief timeline. Eating disorders have existed from at least the medieval times. So we're talking like the 1300s. That is 700 or 800 years ago. Holy anorexia, which, forgive my pronunciation, anorexia mirabilis, means the miraculous lack of appetite. And this was a phenomenon that was occurring in young women during the Middle Ages. Self-starvation was a common behavior amongst religious women in the Middle Ages, and in particular in ancient Rome. The people with holy anorexia were highly regarded as women with an almost supernatural piety, and some were even made into saints for their dedication. The most famous one was Saint Catherine, who was born in Siena in the 1300s. And for almost her whole life, her diet mainly consisted of water and vegetables, a very minimal diet. And by the age of 33, she ended up actually dying of starvation. So there are some parallels between the ancient anorexia from the medieval times and anorexia nervosa now. In both circumstances, the person is aiming towards a valuable, culturally dependent goal. So in present day society, it's beauty and slimness, and back in the medieval times, it was more self-deprivation, medieval self-sacrificing that was valued, and people were made into saints. So the first formal description of anorexia as a medical condition occurred in England in 1689 by Dr. Richard Morton, who referred to his patient as a skeleton clad with skin. And then it wasn't until the 1930s and the 1940s where eating disorders started to be more recognized as having a more mental, psychological, emotional component. And they were around this time recognized as mental health disorders by the medical community. Okay, so moving on to the media and the more recent evolution of eating disorders. I want to mention that eating disorders, we know this pretty commonly, are very closely linked to beauty standards and body image. So although during this talk, I'm going to be talking a lot about female beauty standards and female self-esteem issues, I just want to highlight quickly that males also experience a significant social pressure to look a certain way, and they also experience self-esteem issues. And of course, eating disorders exist in men. We can see in this picture clearly that the ideal male body has evolved over time from to now a white, muscular, chiseled figure with a very low body fat percentage. And you can see the image on the right of this first image that stature is very difficult to obtain. You have to exercise excessively, be very, very careful of what you eat. And this next image is about female body ideals, and we can see that the ideal body type for women fluctuates very drastically with every passing decade. And I just wanted to highlight a few icons. So back in the 1950s, Marilyn Monroe was the ideal female body type, and she was a normal body weight. Her BMI was normal. She was described as voluptuous with curves. And then we see as we go down into the 60s, the body weight starts to drop with Twiggy, who's a thin waif-like figure. And then we move on to a very drastic change in the 1990s with the icon Kate Moss, who was described as heroin chic, meaning she had a very, very slender body. And I remember this growing up in the 90s, this famous quote that came up by Kate Moss, which is nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. And we can see over here Kate Moss's look. She's thin, she's tall, very low percentage body fat. And in this image as well, what's glamorized is she's holding a cigarette, and at the time it was the coffee and cigarette diet was considered very glamorous. So moving on to the 90s, throughout this era, we've been inundated with magazines, TV shows, movies, all portraying white, thin bodies as the ideal. So being thin was something to aspire towards. Being thin is an asset, something that's socially valuable. And this is an article which, a comment which I found on the internet, which is two siblings in 1996 who bought a magazine which had a size 0 top on it, and the 8-year-old girl was able to fit into the top, and her older sister at the age of 12 tried the top, but was very sad, and it clearly affected her self-esteem when she wasn't able to fit into it. And I wanted to highlight something that may be of significance. The beauty industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We've been preoccupied with beauty for a very long time, and the global weight loss industry is also worth billions of dollars, $250 billion. So there are definitely reasons why these messages continue to be widespread. Okay, moving on to the 90s and the early 2000s. This was a time when the internet began to be very common in most middle to upper class households, particularly in the West. And many of you may have heard of pro Anna and pro Mia websites. Just a little bit of a trigger warning over here. We probably will be talking about some things which may be slightly uncomfortable to hear. So as I was saying, you may have heard of pro Anna or pro Mia websites. These are basically websites that almost personify anorexia and bulimia. So pro Anna means Anna is for anorexia, Mia is for bulimia. Typically, if you were to search anorexia or bulimia into a search engine, if you were to Google it, you would probably get information about the illnesses, information of how to receive support, what the symptoms are, what the warning signs are. But if you do look at pro Anna or pro Mia websites, what comes out is slightly different. You get a lot of information about you get the pro Anna websites that come out. So these started to emerge in 2002. Nobody knew who coined the term, who made the first website. But the main message of these websites is that anorexia and bulimia are not illnesses, but they're actually a lifestyle choice. The website's names are things like starving for perfection, totally in control. And the emphasis is more on superiority, empowerment, and there's a sense of pride with actually having this illness. There's a lot of superlative language that's used. So many talk of people who have anorexia within these communities as the elite. And the people with the anorexic lifestyle feel that they're rejecting the more conventional lifestyles that they feel are full of consumption and are weak. So basically what's on these websites are pretty harmful things. They've got tips on how to lose weight. There's competitions that started within this community between the various members of it on how to lose weight. They commiserate with each other when they break their fasts and when they start eating. They give each other tips such as laxatives, emetics to help them vomit. And they give tips as well on how to hide your weight loss from your parents or from your doctors. This was interesting. I found this later on while I was doing this, preparing this talk, that there was a community that started. So they started the red bracelets, which was a sign of solidarity amongst the pro Anna community. So people with anorexia who were on the pro Anna websites or on the forums would wear these red bracelets and would be able to find each other in public and have some sense of community there. So now let's move on to talk about social media. In the last 15 years or so, we've seen the rise of social media. And this is important because as much as we try and escape it, it's a very important part, a very, big part of our lives. Social media is everywhere. A lot of people engage with social media. It affects the way that we behave. It affects the way that we think. It affects the way that we see ourselves and the way that we see the world. So it's really important that we do talk about this. There are a lot of social media users. There's 4.8 billion user accounts on various different platforms of social media. That's a lot, 4 billion user accounts. And the average person spends around 2.5 hours per day on social media. Studies show that the average teenager spends around 7 hours per day on social media. So the impact and messages around this are really very important. And we can see, I don't know if you can see this, but this just shows the trends in the social media and how users were. So we started off with Facebook around 2007, 2008. Instagram was more 2000 between 2013 and 2015. So what has happened is that with time, once Instagram came out, social media has evolved into a tool in which we have basically become able to curate aspects of our lives. Most people, myself included, don't post the mundane aspects of our lives. So we mostly post what we feel that people want to see. Most people don't post their down moments, and you can almost create an illusion that you have the perfect life. So this then can lead to feelings of inadequacy. This can affect people's self-worth. Studies have shown that there's an association between the length of time that people spend on social media and low self-esteem. A lot of the thoughts about this is that this is due to comparison, people feeling that they're not as rich as this person, or they're not able to go on holiday, on these glamorous holidays as much. And of course, there is the common feeling that they're not skinny. And now it's not just Kate Moss and fashion icons and models. It's also, the fact that you see profiles of people you know, so you can look at somebody that you went to high school with and compare yourself, something, a goal that feels a little bit more attainable, and feel not so great about yourself that this person is achieving so much, or they're very beautiful, or they're in a great relationship, or whatever it is that people compare themselves to. And this is not helped by the extensive amount of airbrushing and filtering applications that there are out there. When I was preparing this talk, I looked on my iPhone for airbrushing apps, and there was an extensive amount of both face and body filters. So they're the usual filters on Instagram, but on top of that, you've got the ability to change your body sizes and proportions, so people can make themselves have a thin waist and give themselves basically the ideal curves. And this then leads to people, as I was saying, feeling inadequate, and then going to different measures. So what happens is that it can lead to people looking up ways in which to become what they're aiming to become. And a very common search or hashtag was thinspo, which means thinspiration, and people start looking for ways in which to lose weight or to become thin. And then we do know about the search algorithm, which can actually be very harmful. So Instagram has an explore and a suggested for you. And the way that the algorithm works is that it sees what you're interested in, it sees what accounts you interact with, and then it starts to suggest these applications for you. And we can see that a lot of people on Instagram are young people who already make up a group of people who are at elevated risk. So then if you add this, these unrealistic body standards, and you add artificial intelligence and this search engine, it's basically the perfect storm for somebody to get caught up in this rabbit hole of searching these things. What's a little bit more sinister that I came across was pro-Ana coaches. So vulnerable individuals who've been interacting with certain posts about weight loss have been found by what we call pro-Ana coaches. So people who encourage the anorexic behaviors, find these individuals. If you've liked a post on becoming thin, and then they can send a direct message through Instagram. And what I've put here is just a picture of one of the messages, which is an eating schedule, a really unhealthy eating schedule from a pro-Ana coach to a young person who's basically saying eat half an apple 2 times a day and a cucumber for dinner. And you can see that that's not enough. Also, it's given on one of the days suggested that the person actually fast. So there is an extensive amount of stuff that is available on social media. I do want to just say that not everything has started with malintent. There are lots of fitness gurus on social media. There are there are nutritional pages. And I just wanted to briefly touch on a trend that was happening over the last couple of years, which was what I eat in a day. And fitness models where fitness gurus and fitness professionals, fitness influencers were filming what they eat in a day. And that had all sorts of perspectives. So it had people who were heavier and people who were very thin as well. But the trends that picked up were the very thin and the ideal figures. So that actually led to something which I'll touch on briefly, which is orthorexia. So orthorexia is not formally recognized in the DSM, but there's a lot of awareness that is being raised about orthorexia now. Orthorexia is the obsession with eating well and the obsession with eating healthy. So there's a big concern that these individuals have a big concern with nutritional quality and the nutrition of the foods, almost to an unhealthy extent. So it leads to them having unhealthy consequences like having nutritional deficiencies, being isolated, and leading to other things like anxiety. So obviously eating well is a good thing. Being aware of your nutrition is good, but this is something that has gone to an almost obsessive extent. And it's been found that it's very closely linked actually to OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and it's also frequently comorbid with anorexia nervosa. There was a study in 2017, which was published in Eating and Weight Loss Disorders, that found that higher Instagram use was associated with orthorexia. And it was interesting because no other social platform was connected to this. So not TikTok, not Facebook, but the more time you spent on Instagram, the more likely you were to develop orthorexia. Finally, just before I move on to the more positive aspects of social media, I just want to briefly touch on cyberbullying, which exists through all ages, but mainly in adolescence. So we know that adolescence anyway is a time when there's a lot of intense pressure, social pressure to behave in a certain way and to look in a certain way. And bullying has long been linked with eating disorders. Cyberbullying is no different. Body image and body weight issues are prime targets for cyberbullying, and fat shaming is actually one of the most common forms. So it's no surprise that young people and all people across the internet have become targets of this and have started to become socially isolated. That can lead to body image disorders, body image issues, and then change in patterns of eating. So I just want to, I'm coming towards the end, but I want to say that there are benefits of social media. I, for one, find quite a lot of benefits. I think it's an extremely powerful tool, though we've talked about a lot of the detriments, but it's powerful in order to promote worthwhile causes. I know I myself, sometimes if I'm passionate about a certain issue, would share it on my social media platform. We've just gone through COVID. Social media is a great way to stay. We've seen that it was the only way around the time of lockdown to stay connected with friends. You can find new friends, new communities through social media, and lots of resources as well. There's just a picture over here that I put up from TikTok. So TikTok took this initiative to tackle the pro-Ana content. So if you search pro-Ana, it actually gives you with information and support resources about eating disorders. And just a few tips on how to manage this. So we can all end up spending a lot of time on social media. We know that these are the way that these companies are designed. Their businesses at the end of the day, they hold your short attention span by having short, very addictive features. So what I would suggest is choose who you follow mindfully. You don't need to be following everybody. Keep your network limited. Not everybody needs to be following you. Limit how much screen time, track how much screen time. Now most iPhones and Androids have a way that you can track how much time you're spending on each app as well. So try and bring it down and keep it limited. Some people find it helpful to take a digital detox. And it's also important that we evaluate the media that's presented to us. So be critical about it. At times you can look at a post and feel inadequate about yourself, but know that there's a lot of ways to filter, and a lot of this stuff is not rooted in reality. And this is just one final slide to show that there are ways in which you can also attempt to fight the algorithm. You can disable your suggested post and clear your search history as well. So yeah, thank you very much for having me today.